the screening, she wore a dress made by an Osage fashion designer. It was really, really cool. But she's connected with her.
So yeah, let's have everyone file in down.
Come on down.
I'm almost tempted to close off the wall, but it's fine. I think we're good.
Close off.
No, I think we're good.
I just got the camera set.
Don't fall on me, Eddie.
Okay. Sponsored by, what's that thing called?
Grammarly?
That one, Grammarly. Sponsored by Grammarly.
Get out of here, Grammarly. You're interrupting the Legend of Zelda. So, I am going to give some open remarks, but before we get settled in and kick off the discussion, we need to very carefully define Web3.
Good luck.
Raise your hand if you feel like you've got a good grip on what Web3 technology is.
I have an introductory grip on what Web3
Awesome.
watched a
video. That's fine. So, there is no better way to sum up Web3 than to just say it's the next version of the internet. But when you say that, it doesn't, you don't get it, right? It's not very clear. What you have to do to understand Web3 is understand the current web. So, unfortunately, we're all probably a little too young or recent into technology to remember Web 1. Not all of us. But, Jeremy, you remember Web 1? Do you remember what it was like?
Yeah, it was a Word document on a computer.
Yeah. There wasn't buttons, really. There wasn't interactivity. Web 2 was that interactivity. And this has taken us from, AOL to Google to very different applications that we see today. Even something like Roblox is a Web 2 based game. And so Web 2 is really interactivity, being seamless, being able to talk with someone in Japan, being able to go and explore the internet, all of these wonderful things we're very familiar with in our day-to-day life. So what Web 3 is the next generation of the internet. It's what comes after. And this is digital ownership. So what is digital ownership? The easiest way to describe it, think about how you own a thing, a physical item. I own this water bottle. What am I capable, what are my rights as far as owning this water bottle?
You could give it to somebody.
I can give it to somebody, right? I can keep it for myself. I can consume it. I can recycle it. I could choose to pour half in a cup and give it to Nikki. There's lots of things that I could do with the water because I own it and it's mine. Do any of you own a video game per se?
I don't.
Okay.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, you don't really own a video game in the typical sense. You can have a Minecraft purchase and you own the game and that allows you to play the game. Even to some extent, give someone else your username and password and be able to share that with them and have them play the game.
I have Game Boy games.
Right, and there was old Game Boy games, cartridges and CDs and all that good stuff that you can exchange. and it's a physical thing that you own, and there's some implications of that. In the internet before, we've never been able to give people rights over their digital assets that they own. There's some extent to this where you see markets like Steam being able to trade skins and trading cards and in-game items, but for the majority of Web 2, we have not seen full ownership and rights. So digital ownership really comes in enabling someone to trade. So let's say I buy a skin in the game and I'm done with the game. Well, what are my options? Typically in a Web 2 game, there's nothing. You know, I put the value into the game, I buy the skin, that money stays with the developer. I never get anything out of it other than, hey, now I can use this skin in the game.
I used to be able to go sell my skins for CSGO.
Right. And most games you can't. CSGO, however, you can. And that's led to these interesting results where you have an entire economy built around the game and the virtual ability to trade. So what really is powerful with digital ownership? Being able to own a digital thing just like you own a physical thing. And so Web3, when you're talking about it, you can get into decentralization, blockchain, even talking about token economies. The end user experience, virtually none of that matters. These terms matter very much on a technical level, but on an end user experience, the result's going to be pretty the same. So what's a video game we've all played? Maybe League of Legends. Everyone's generally familiar with that. So in League of Legends, you've got your in-game currencies, you've got your riot points and your influence points. And you use those to buy skins in the game, buy runes, which are actual in-game upgrades to your characters, and various different things to either show off your reputation in the game, get some sort of benefit, or personalize it to yourself. These influence points and riot points could be considered tokens. Now, they're not tokenized blockchain, but they might as well be in-game tokens. And so when we are thinking about what a Web3 game is, it's really not too much different for the user. They'll experience it virtually the same, except for the fact that there's something they can get with the tokens. There's some value that comes back to them. Either it's purely within the scope of the game, but usually with Web3, we're looking at games that have an in and an out of value. So you, instead of just putting in value and it floats around the system, now you can have put in value and take it out. This allows some really neat things as far as how content is delivered, how it is streamed, even talking about how content gets monetized. So if we take, let's say, cosmetics again, a video game having a skin for a character that is existing within the game and can be traded with players of the game. So if I buy a skin in season 1 of a game for 500 tokens and I wait a year and now it's season 3 or 4 of this game, I could maybe resell that original asset I bought for, instead of the 500 tokens I bought it for, maybe it's 5,000. And that enables me to either buy new skins, take that money out of the game and transfer it straight up to Ethereum or some other sort of currency, and be able to not have the value just disappear. Right now, Web 2 is very 1 to 0. I give in $1, nothing's back. Web 3 has the potential to turn 1 to 2. where I put something in and I actually get more value than I put in. This won't always be the case. I mean, these are complex economies that we're starting to talk about. When you think about what a Web3 game means, it's not a game that is on the chain necessarily, though most of them will be. What you really think when you hear a Web3 game is it's a game that is a multiplayer game, because hey, you're using the web, you got to utilize it for something. It's got an in-game economy for people to trade things. Usually there are multiple different ways, so if you think about a game like Minecraft, what are the ways that you could go about getting emeralds or diamonds to trade with other players? Well, you could mine, you could maybe go fight and explore dungeons, you could farm food and use that as your base trade element. There's all of these different things you can do within the game to generate value and contribute to this larger ecosystem. There's some room for specialization there in terms of like, yeah, you'll have players and maybe guilds that form of these players around, hey, we help new players get started on the game, or we specifically do gold farming, or whatever various aspect this guild specializes in. So all of these crazy technologies are really coming together in a crazy way. It can't be summarized better than digital ownership. So before we get into the rest of the opening remarks, I wanted to ask, does anyone have any questions around the definition of Web3, Web3 games, or anything discussed thus far?
Can you quickly explain what is, you mentioned on the chain, like games would be on the chain. What does that actually mean?
So that means some assets in the game are a part of a blockchain ledger. So this could be purchases in the game, could simply be on the blockchain, but it could also be actual gameplay and specific actions taken during a match. It can also be interactions between players and trades within the economy, or other different events. So on the chain just means that it is ledgerized using a blockchain.
So does that mean if a game doesn't use that it would be off the chain?
Yes.
So you are talking about actually throwing compute, like the actual game, the compute on the chain, not just not just using it as database storage.
Yeah. You definitely could.
You could, but you can't. It's like 15 transactions per second on Ether. I guess Binance
well,
is...
so and
I'm thinking I'm going to.
No. You bring up a really wonderful point that is going to come up later during our discussion. And that's, hey, if I'm running off of an Ethereum base, there's a lot of gas fees that come with that. There have been some companies, I think Mistin Play is one of the big ones, a couple of other people in the Web3 platform space who are building a chain where there is no gas toll for transactions. And you can do, like those hundreds of gameplay interactions that happen in a minute, all on the chain, or at least able to be ledgerized after the completion of the game.
You're right. There are like what is it, Axios? Like they do one, but they own the game and the chain. So so digital ownership is still, they would own it.
Right, and
essentially.
So there is still some level of centralization. When we think about decentralization, it's not black or white. It is very much a gray scale of, is it completely decentralized and autonomous, or is it centralized to some degree? There will be lots of interplay and lots of different moments where having something more decentralized is better to its target audience, and something less decentralized is more beneficial. Again, what's interesting is the user experience doesn't really change whether or not it's centralized or decentralized. Ultimately, for a Web3 game to succeed, it needs to be a good game first. You can't just tokenize a game, put it out there, and have people love it. You will get some attention. There are games that do this. That example is floating out of my head, but they basically made a kind of crappy game. But the point of it was that they have all of these Web3 integrations and this massive economy within the game, so you can start to understand and pioneer what some of this looks like and what it'll play like. So when you think about, hey, what is a Web3 game? It's a good game first. It's got to be a tight multiplayer game that people want to play. That is the only way it will sustain an economy and be able to overcome whatever gas fees or challenges that the developer may have in servicing a Web3 game. And there's this problem of scaling is really huge, right? Because you can imagine, well, if I only have 100 players, maybe Ethereum isn't so bad, because then they can take it right back out and put it into Ethereum, and that's great for users. It's very liquefiable, which is great from a user experience perspective. There's a company called Polygon. I think they have Polygon Studio that does their developer support and platform pushing. But then there's I think it's called the Polygon Protocol, which if you think of typical internet protocol, Polygon Protocol is Web3. So they are Ethereum based. And I was actually listening to a podcast today where the CEO is talking about gas prices. And yes, right now, it kind of is expensive to run it, but it works. It's not scalable, but they have a working solution, and his perspective on it is we're exploring little different tools, bits and pieces, parts of the economy, evolutions of Ethereum, or how we can adapt to a new base one for the Polygon platform. Any other questions so far to just get on the same page about Web3?
One final thing about what you just brought up. What is gas prices?
So
I assume it's like vehicle gas prices, right?
Yeah, it's a very good way to think about it. Jeremy, do you think you could answer this?
So for Ether, the gas price is the amount per transaction. It's the amount of energy or the amount that it costs to make a transaction and place it on the chain.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, so generally, if you think of Bitcoin has a very high gas price, right? Because there's a lot of computation happening. Whereas platforms like Ethereum are starting to move away from traditional mining and trying to rework so their gas prices can be scalable.
Is this a question of how many computations it takes, or how many computers or units there are available to make these computations? Like if there are more,
All of it.
if there are more users that have machines open for computations, does that reduce the prices?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So it's not like you can incentivize your user base, like, oh, if you run your computer on Ethereum computations for 5 hours, we give you a loot box or something like that.
It literally comes down to an average energy cost. So
Okay.
the reason that a lot of the reasons with gas prices, so like this is the group I helped down here, Stand Up American Good Power, and I mean they go across the entire country and even out of the country looking for, it's called stranded natural gas, because most of the computers are running off energy from natural gas.
Yeah.
So really what it comes down to is all the users using that currency, or all the miners and everything, what it's costing them per megawatt hour. And then that translates to the energy, and then an average comes out on that.
Got it.
Well, that's for proof of work, but then
Yeah.
you have proof of stake.
Yep.
And then you have the node that, what is that company? I can't remember what that other chain is right now, but they use that node computation. But all that's going to go into it too.
Got it.
Cool. Any other questions? We've had some quiet voices in the room. Not to call you out, but I just want to make sure you've got a complete understanding before we move forward in the conversation.
So it's normal that your gas prices will scale the more transactions that you have?
It's
Each
not normal.
single transaction?
No, it's not normal. That's the challenge right now, is with the current model and the gas prices, the more that you ramp up, the more that you're paying, because if you think about your chain, each user isn't just adding one user, they're actually adding a huge list and amount of transactions and things needing to be added to the blockchain. So one user actually adds a lot of strain on your chain and the system. So where it's not scalable is once you start getting into the millions to billions of users. Great question. Any other questions, basics about maybe blockchain or decentralization or token economies? Cool. I'd like to do a special little thing. I want everyone in a circle, we'll start clockwise with Nikki, to give an example of a virtual economy that you have participated in some way. So Nikki, do you have a virtual economy that you've participated in?
I mean, I way back in middle school, actually, the CS:GO skins. Yeah, I was gifted a skin and held on to it for I didn't play the game for 2 years, and then I think it was I was a sophomore in high school and I sold it for $300. I just could not wrap my head around it. I was why did that increase in value so much? I don't know, or maybe it was worth that much originally, but
That's awesome. And it's really cool to see the scarcity there. And yeah, it's the nerd value. People like that skin. Not everyone has it. The people who buy it originally buy it and hold on to it. And so that creates scarcity, which will increase demand and price. Jeremy?
I spent years gold farming in World of Warcraft.
Nice. Very, very productive.
Very unproductive.
Well, it could be, and that's what's interesting was World of Warcraft was
made
this.
a lot of money doing it, a lot of real money doing it.
It really transformed how people played and thought about games. There were whole companies and organizations devoted to gold farming, and it was paving people's riches and lives. It was a really intense economy, and it was.
He wasn't even he's not even a techie guy, but he now knows how to build a World of Warcraft bot.
Right.
Because just to do it.
And the other big piece of that was you can't even take the gold out of the game. The only way that you can sell gold is by building a platform to sell your gold and then transacting it between two accounts, which carries a lot of risk because it's not supported by the developer, and if they catch you doing it, they'll ban your account. So it's this super interesting economy that exists, a very low market share white market, above board table, and then a huge market share in the black market and under the table happenings of World of Warcraft. I absolutely love the economy of World of Warcraft. Game was not for me.
Yeah. So before WoW, I played Star Wars Galaxies, and that had a pretty complex economy, and I came into it late in the game, so inflation was just insane, like most games are. But it got me really thinking early on about game economies, and then learning about Second Life, and I never played it myself, but I am fascinated with that, especially as a forerunner of a lot of the 3D spaces that I'm seeing pop up in Web3, Second Life, and so there was a whole documentary about people just quitting their jobs and being either designers or participating in that complex economy. So yeah, my personal experience in Star Wars Galaxies that I never did any real money transactions with, but that led into me learning about the economy, the real world economies. I'm wow, in Second Life, and just blew up from there.
Awesome.
My experience with the virtual economy actually comes from Minecraft. Servers, oftentimes, they have people that specialize in gathering certain types of resources. Generally, the more time-intensive or labor-intensive it is to get a resource, the more expensive something costs.
Right.
And as a community, you decide on a currency to use, and most of the time it's diamonds. And so, one of the biggest recent things was the netherite ingots, which is a new resource you could have that is extremely hard to get a hold of. People would just spend hours collecting this stuff, then they'd sell it for massive amounts of diamonds. And it's just all about what you decide to focus on collecting, and then you can sell it to people who want it. So another thing on the sort of opposite end of that, whereas netherite was extremely hard to collect and took a lot of time to get one single piece, there were things like sand and gravel, which are not renewable resources, so you have to go mine them physically. But normally when you need those resources, you need massive amounts of them, like 50 stacks of sand and gravel so you can make dynamite or whatever you want. And it just takes hours and hours to collect all that. Well, people would make that their specialty. They would just collect sand and gravel all day and sell you 5 full stacks of it for 1 diamond or something like that. And so as people were into building new things and new blocks come out in Minecraft, the economy is sort of always shifting as to what's valuable right now or not, which is really cool.
It's super interesting. Yeah, I love seeing just a game like Minecraft leading to such a complex economy,
Right.
just from, hey, it's a survival mode. Because if it was creative, there's
Right.
Right.
nothing
You
there.
get everything.
But the simple fact that you gotta eat, you can't die, and like you need a respawn, and these things aren't just necessarily there in the world. You gotta go out and find them.
You lose your stuff when you die.
Right. It creates scarcity,
Right.
and it creates an economy that can exist within the game. Which is really cool.
Really just the same thing. A lot of Minecraft for middle school and servers. People have jobs and do that and kind of make their way through the game like that. They usually didn't play a whole lot of games with economies, but
Yeah, awesome.
I've got a ton, but I think one of the ones that I liked the most and got me into real world trading was Eve.
You online?
That was
Yeah.
another one that piqued my interest.
That was going to be my example.
Yeah.
Well, it's because it's such. I mean, it did. I was able to take all the skills I learned in Eve and I translated it to real world markets, and
I bet.
it's pretty much a 1-for-1 swap.
Yeah. And what's really cool about virtual economies is they're a lot lower risk.
Oh yeah.
If I default on a loan in World of Warcraft, I am not going to get evicted from my house. I may just be kicked out of my guild and said some harsh words to. A lot less risky than the real world to participate in a virtual economy and fail. And that can be really great learning experiences.
The metaverse before the metaverse was cool. I was super into Second Life.
Hey, Second Life is huge.
Hey, so I literally built stuff for people for money, and I had like a little shop, and there was this idea of like owning land and having land on servers and stuff. Also, RuneScape was a big one for me, and watching players have this massive influence on the cost of items just because they would overbuy or oversell things on the grand marketplace. It was really, really interesting.
Do you remember how much money you made off of Second Life?
Like $3, $4.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
That's not part of this talk, but that would be a whole other talk.
Yeah.
It's like taking advantage of young people in that way, making
Right.
money off of them.
Right. Second Life is really interesting, and it definitely was the metaverse before the metaverse was a thing. Now, we see some like virtual economies, stuff like Upland. I forget the name of the app, but there's this one like you can buy land in a virtual VR world, and Snoop Dogg bought like a piece of land for cheap, but then if you wanted a house next to Snoop Dogg's virtual house, it was like $500,000 for this piece of virtual land. And there's not even a guarantee that Snoop Dogg's online all the time, or will even be playing the game in 2 years. So like, why did you buy it? I don't know. But I digress. We could see virtual economies have been a thing for a long time and have been immensely beneficial for learning, for generating money, for having fun, getting to see these massive happenings in a multiplayer economy. It's really cool. And, it begs the question of, what is the next thing with virtual economies? And that's integrating with the real world economy. It's going to happen through Web3 games. You're going to have assets that are on the chain that can be exchanged or destroyed, whatever system the game developer decides to create to have that value be taken out. So this is making it not below the table and black market to trade your World of Warcraft gold and to sell it to people. Instead, it takes it and makes it above board and something that the developers can clue in on. Imagine if you could just buy gold in World of Warcraft from Blizzard, and or even just from other players, not necessarily from Blizzard, and Blizzard takes a 3% or 5% revenue on that transaction. Blizzard would have made a lot of money because there are lots of people and lots of demand to trade this stuff.
For money laundering, because inevitably that's what would happen.
Right. And you see that happening with virtual currencies. Lots of money laundering is happening with Bitcoin and Ethereum because your transactions can happen so fast. And there's all of this different addressing, and there are public and private ledgers and so many different coins that can lend themselves to different clever ways to use money. So where does Web3 come in for games? So far, we've talked about virtual economies. What is the actual value that Web3 is providing these game developers?
Sean's like interchangeability, right? So like instead of the 1-to-0 ratio that you were talking about before, where I have all these diamonds in Minecraft and I'm gonna go play something else now. Okay, cool. Like you could actually trade those out for some sort of more like widespread item, right? So like some like Web3 tokens or Bitcoin or something like that, where you could actually take the value that you've generated in one game and transfer it to another game or to real life or something like that, right?
Yeah. If I'm a developer and I have a pool of games and I want my players, when they get bored of a game, to be able to switch to another one, there's no reason I couldn't have the assets or some sort of base underlying token that can be used across all of the games. What you said hits on something really powerful about investment. It's enabling your consumers to become patrons of your business rather than buyers of your product. And so when I go in and I buy a new skin or a new piece of armor in World of Warcraft, and I want to sell that because now I want to play Call of Duty, I could exchange it for some tokens, playing Call of Duty. What's the loss for Blizzard? There is none. Activision Blizzard's happy because I'm still within their ecosystem. But it also enables users to have a really good experience, and if the developers monetizing transactions, what you'll see is even when users exit, the developer benefits because they're choosing to exit, give their assets to other players, usually at a cheap price, so it'll sell, which creates a great user experience for other players, and B, causes a transaction to happen, so the developer gets 3 to 30% or whatever they dictate of said transaction. Any other primary values that we see Web3 offering video games?
User generated content.
Yes.
That it would make it easier. I'm just playing the other side right now, but yeah, that would make it easier.
Well, yeah. So user generated content is huge. If we think about games like Skyrim, it had an initial release and it was a full polished game. Modders and content creators were able to take this game and make whole new games out of it.
Make it good.
Bug fixes that the developers didn't put in themselves. Faster ways to travel around the map, new interactions, new skins for things, different shaders and visual effects. All of this stuff is content. And what community content really is it's taking a system and layering something on top of it. When a user makes content, a modder goes and makes a mod, why do they do it?
They want something out of it.
Yeah, they're looking for something very specific.
Right. I desire to, in my game, play a version of this character. So user-generated content is really, really huge, and this will be the focus of our discussion. When you think about content, right, we're very, with Web 2 games and single-player games, used to curated content, right? You go to a restaurant, the chef has a menu that is curated, and you order off of that menu. You play Skyrim, you have a curated list of choices. You can choose to be fighting for the Empire or fighting for the Rebels, blue or red, right? It's very much the same sort of thing that when you go to a restaurant, here's a curated menu for you. Now, how is a restaurant like Chipotle different from an Outback Steakhouse?
Chipotle, you can kind of make your own thing.
Yeah, the menu isn't curated per se. The menu is kind of like, here's a system, make your own thing out of it. And yeah, it's very open and modular. So when we're thinking about, when you're going to eat at Chipotle, it doesn't look at all the same for me as it would for someone else. But if we're going to go play Skyrim, the intro is going to be the same exact thing. The game will change once we pick who our character actually is, but until that point, it's exactly the same. And so that is what curated content is. What user-generated content offers, and specifically with Web3 having digital ownership be a part of it, is to have user-generated content that is monetizable. Before we get into that, I think there are some more things we need to clear up about Web3 and the values that it offers. So let's take a look at our board. So we have
I think
digital ownership.
NFT is a good segue from that, because that's going to be my next quarrel with this.
So NFT, one big part of digital ownership is ownership over your digital reputation. So the best way I've heard this talked about is how many of you are there in reality? Just one, right? You're an individual. How many versions of you exist on the Web 2 internet? Too many. You got a Facebook profile, you've got a Google account, you've got that one Reddit account that you threw away, that you've got all these various identities and personas, and some of them are linked and verifiable, but it's very, very messy. And there can be 100 versions of yourself out there on the internet. What Web3 offers is to be able to digitally own your reputation and be able to control what is visible to other parties. So if I have, my government ID in there and my date of birth, my name, where I live, all in my reputation wallet, we can call it, then I can choose, depending upon the protocol of a website, to share certain information. Maybe if I'm making an account with somewhere, they need to see my ID to verify that I'm a real person. Or maybe not even actually see it, but verify that a verified ID exists in the wallet. So it allows you to share your reputation while maintaining your privacy, which is really huge because it's never been possible in the internet before. So we have digital ownership, NFTs, reputations. We have user-generated content, UGC. Anything else that Web3 really offers video games?
You'd mentioned it before. I don't think we talked about it today, but it was like a backlog or something like that. That would be, we talked about it in terms of like finding out who was the first person to do a move in Street Fighter or something like that.
So your data can be on the chain. So your gameplay data can be not just accounted for, but associated with a digital ownership. This player did this move or made this deck in Hearthstone, and that's tracked that they came up with this new way of doing things. Great. So we've got some things lined up. Does everyone know what an NFT is? Non-fungible token. Pretty straightforward. Does everyone know what non-fungible means?
Not on the top of my head, that one.
Can't be funged.
That's right. No funging here.
Can't funge it.
It's not a physical thing you're owning.
It's that
It's not physically tied to a specific monetary value. It's whatever people make it. It's whatever people want it to be.
Yeah, it's less like having a coin and more like having a piece of art.
Fungible. Of goods contracted for without an individual specimen being specified. Able to replace or be replaced by another identical item. Mutually interchangeable is fungible. So non-fungible would be not that.
not interchangeable.
Right.
Yeah. So unique is a good way to think about it. So, talking about user-generated content. Actually, there was a couple more things about digital economies I wanted to hit on. Joe had brought up EVE Online. This is a wonderful example of a virtual economy where a lot was at stake. There was in this game, different guilds that started specializing in different things. And not all of them were PvP, but a lot of them were. And some of these PvP guilds start wars with each other, where they're destroying enemy ships and stuff. The thing is, it's a lot of time and money to make these capital ships and fight them. In one of the first battles, there was tens of thousands of dollars worth of virtual assets that were destroyed within the matter of an hour or so in this giant battle. And what ensued was this one big PvP clan was gonna go around, destroy everybody's assets, and just keep this wave of destruction going till they have total control. And so what happened was other PvP clans who weren't associated with them started warring with them and were pulling in non-PvP clans to come risk their assets in this war, even though they're not in it for the player versus player. They're getting them because they're saying, hey, these guys are just destroying assets. If you want the value of the game to maintain, you need to help us beat them and fight them.
Yeah, it was a survival.
Yeah, so literally hundreds of thousands of dollars have been
Millions.
lost in this game, which is absolutely crazy to think about. Where this hits on is it proves people will still care about their virtual items, their virtual happenings, and the virtual economy. It can still be very real, have impact financially outside of the game. Super clear on that. I think where we need to hit next is, user-generated content. I mean, mods are amazing. They make games so much better than what they were upon release. And this curated content can be expanded upon. But the potential offering of Web3 might mean that we don't need curated content anymore. How powerful is it to have a mod? What is actually happening when someone makes a mod?
And create content that wasn't originally in the game. Normally it's based off something specific they want.
They want. Yes, you hit on something very key there. A modder demands to see something in the game, they go out and make it. Why is this powerful? Because it's the user, it is the player demanding something out of the system and being able to get it. A very famous game that does and entirely relies upon user-generated content is a game called Mario Maker. And in it, it has Mario, it has the system, but it also has a system for creating levels. The actual game isn't any of the levels that Nintendo created. It's all user-generated content, levels made by other users that you can download and play on. Why was this successful?
It's kind of more fun.
Right.
Infinite content.
Infinite content.
Yeah.
If I'm going to go play Mario Maker, it's a lot more engaging to have unlimited levels that I can pick from and not have to go through the curated loop. It also threatens to change up Mario a lot. How many Mario games have there been? I believe it's over 30 or 40 or 50.
It's up there.
It's a lot of games that have been made under the Mario IP. And you know what? Do I care for all of them? Maybe, maybe not. Is it worth, if I've played Super Mario Galaxy, to go back and play Super Mario 64? Maybe. But what Mario Maker does,
Definitely.
what Mario Maker does is it creates unlimited content to go out there and chase. That's also fresh. It won't just be Nintendo's take on what Mario is, because you've seen that 50 to 100 times of what Mario, the platformer game, can be, and what Nintendo thinks it can be. Mario Maker allows us to see what people demand from Mario. So if you go download Mario Maker and you look at the most popular maps of all time, what you're looking at is not actually okay, what are good maps or whatever. You're looking at what do people demand from Mario Maker. So this is an extremely useful tool for Nintendo, because they have spent no money on content creation, all of their money on building the system and then providing long-term support for it. On the end of it, it's okay, great, we have this game people can endlessly play. Other piece of it is, hey, look at this. Now we could see exactly what the users want from Mario and figure out what new gameplay interactions people really enjoy. So it really transforms what games can be.
What's the incentive there for a major label maker like that to open their entire IP up so that anybody can do everything? That they get paid, or they'll get, like Nintendo, they'll get the initial the initial money for the game itself, but then there's nothing else coming in.
And this is a huge problem, not just for user-generated content
But
games.
also the
Yeah.
chain. Like, what's the incentive for the maker of the? So they would need to make their own chain also, because otherwise the chain would be, affected, probably detrimentally, because that's way too much activity on it.
Right.
I don't see theoretically, yeah, it's possible. Then on top of that, with NFTs, if let's say my user generated content was an NFT, some kind of, but so I sold my NFT skin to you, and then I just shut my server off.
So I can actually kind of give a smaller scale on it, on what would cause a larger company to be interested in it. So like the one I'm working on is an MMO based on VR and everything. And I want to do something very similar to what Warframe did, where after the general game's out, let's say someone comes up with a really cool sword idea. They're able to submit this idea, and all my team would have to do is literally look at it and say, hey, this is approved. And they can make it war friendly, not war friendly, but then we say, hey, this can be approved. Or let's say, you have every year, everyone has like their Halloween or their Christmas event for these big MMOs. One of the cool things you could do is have a competition where a lot of these creators could submit their designs for a sword or something. And so like Warframe, what they do is then you can go buy it directly from the designer from Steam. And so they make a small portion off of it, but the developer also gets a very small portion of that.
And is your company, are they a DAO or are they private?
So they'd be private, but really, so I mean, I guess my thing is though, the other part is, let's say the content was in the game, you didn't have to pay for it, like Warframe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the initial creator, you pay them for the content and then you own it. My major thing for it, and I think what you'd see with a lot of MMOs, is that then you no longer are having to pay for tons and tons of creators, because a lot of these like player-driven content, you can get the assets for much cheaper.
Right, and no, I
yeah,
understand
so that would be.
But so to your first point, that would completely take the decentralized out of the whole thing.
And it could.
Yeah, for some of these, and that's what I was saying earlier, so like for some of these MMOs and stuff, there's going to be a certain amount of decentralization that I think will be helpful, but most of it, I don't think the players are going to want it that decentralized. I think the one thing that will be decentralized in something like an MMO that players will want is more like similar to the blockchain, where you've got multiple machines, multiple people constantly verifying what's happened in transactions. Like right now, if you're playing an MMO, one of the worst things that happens is a rollback, or they have to do an update because something got broke and they have to roll it back. And like I do a lot of MMOs. You said you do gold farming and stuff, like an ESO and stuff. I'll make millions and everything, but that is a couple hours of content. Okay, so I still do. That's my whole thing. Now, if they all of a sudden come out and say, hey, we have to roll back, and they even roll back by like 2 hours, I might lose 3 million in transactions. I might lose, 2 hours worth of farming, which could come out to be 6 million. I might not get those same spawns to come up again. But if you had something that was more decentralized on the accountability side of it, kind of that recurring, your rollbacks would probably be a lot less farther back, and be a lot less detrimental, because you could go back and verify. Because that's another thing. Like, let's say you accidentally got like a legendary thing. It's a very rare drop, and you can somehow prove you had it. On a rollback, you can typically send an email to the developer, and they're like, "Hey, cool, we get it," and they'll give it to you because they know how hard it is to get. On something that had more of that decentralized system, there'd be a higher chance that very easily it would be verified on at least the majority of machines that you already had that asset, especially if it was built in more of an NFT kind of style design. And so that's where I really think games like that, you're going to see. It's not going to be fully decentralized. The decentralization there you're going to see is either in that accountability, and then since multiple people can give content to it, rather than having one studio trying to come up with all the ideas, however big your player base is, normally about 25% of them are content creators. And they can come up with swords, or you'll have guys that are just artists that say, hey, this is a really cool idea. And then a 3D artist will be like, no, actually that is. Let's submit it. And then both of them could get a little bit of credit for it, or you can make it where it's constant credit.
And one big thing to hit on is that the models won't look the same. The models are going to be very different. The market for games specifically was changed massively by a concept called free-to-play. This was a new model for games that, how are you going to make money off your game? You're going to go out and distribute it for free? Well, what it actually does is it increases your net to capture more whales, people who spend thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars on your game.
Rift.
Right. And so when you think about, how is a company going to, why would a company be interested in a Web3 game? Well, it's because they're no longer building a game per se. They're not compiling a bunch of, what was that word that I had used? Content, the curated content. They're building a system, and they're letting users populate that system with what they find interesting. Great successes of this are like Second Life, but more recently Roblox. Roblox has existed for like 15 something years, and it only really took off with a massive amount of user content and having that small community grow and grow and grow till it explodes. And now there's tons of users, there's companies that make games specifically in Roblox and are generating millions of dollars in revenue. And so as a developer, if I am making a Web3 game, I'm not interested in selling my game. It needs to be free to play to get as many users acquisitioned and in the game. Then it needs to have lots of economic trades, and those need to be tokenized so that I can charge a transaction fee on those. Then there should be ways for people to spend money in the game that flexes.
So in this scenario, though, you're building the chain also, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This
Or
would not
you're
be-
working with an existing platform and using their chain and APIs.
So in that case, it would not be decentralized, right?
Right.
Yes and no. So decentralization is an interesting topic here because as a developer, I'm not interested in controlling the game economy to some extent. I want to have the game economy run itself, be fully decentralized, but be the biggest player in it.
But as a stockholder, I am worried about the other facet of that.
Yeah.
What you said originally. I am worried about the having some control over more than just okay, you're born, be free.
Right. Well, and so the economy itself can be very decentralized, but your ability as a developer to contribute to that economy could be skewed. You could generate unlimited items per se, and that's not necessarily centralized. It's just built within your decentralized system. And so the idea is to make it autonomous and as decentralized as possible, while setting yourself up to make money off of the economy instead of making your money off of individual users. If that makes sense. So the models change a lot. If you're thinking about, as a developer, if you're going to make a Web3 game, you might not care to make any curated content at all, and you want to depend entirely upon user-generated content. And already we've seen games that do have Web3 economies and are gaining traction. There hasn't been AAA adoption yet. Does anyone know why, or have a guess?
Onboarding for new players can be very tech heavy.
Yes, you've hit upon Web3's biggest struggle right now. Is the user experience of it sucks. It is so hard to onboard someone.
Yeah.
Does anyone remember old account sign up back in the day where you had to fill out like 3 to 5 pages worth of information just to set up your account? Apps died on the Google Play Store and the Apple Store by having too lengthy of an account sign up process. each new page you have in your account process eliminates about 20% of the users, or more. So like, how easy it is to actually sign up and start using your app makes a huge difference. That's why free-to-play models were really awesome, because you can start getting the value from the game instantly. But if you're going to go play a Web3 game right now, you have to have a wallet. You got to have enough funds in that wallet. You got to be able to understand how the wallet works and what information you need from it. You need to have a wallet that actually is configured and supported by the game that you're planning on using, and then you need to verify all of that stuff and have them talk to each other. That process is terrible. And the reason AAA has not gotten involved with it yet is because there is not mass adoption of cryptocurrency and token-based currencies and economics. So AAA is not there yet because they don't have the need to quite yet. But that's where we see a lot of indie companies, venture capitalist-backed game devs, new platforms are pushing the boundaries of this to explore it and try to get it right. Because then, hey, if you get it right and you're really popular, Activision Blizzard is going to want to buy you, Nintendo's going to want to buy you, Niantic's going to want to buy you, because you've figured out the next model for games. And so there's been this big hype around play to earn and play to own, which is the concept that if I play the game, I should earn some tokens back. And this means your dedicated users, let's say it's a game like Counter-Strike Go, each time you're getting into a match, you're like hedging a bet. So you're like, I put 200 tokens in, and out of the 10-player match, winner takes all or something.
That's gambling.
Right. And you can have gambling within the game system and being able to participate in a prize. It's not exactly gambling per se. It's more like, hey, I pay $20 for the entry to this tournament, and then there's a prize pool.
Make that number to pull a lever.
Make that argument to the government, though. It's not actually gambling.
Especially to the EU. They're not going to be happy about it.
Especially when most of your player base in this case is underage, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be similar to, because you talk about like game platforms moving to systems, and then we had that whole gambling issue with like Battlefront and getting banned in the EU and like stuff like that. I think the same thing is going to happen with this, where it's going to go through the growing pains of being a problem and legislation having to come in and probably regulate it.
Well, and that's the thing. Legislation always lags behind and needs to catch up.
Yeah.
Technology is going to push the boundaries first, and then legislation will come in after to fix problems that arise. That is natural. Uber is one of the biggest examples of legislation coming in after and really changing things
The whole
up.
point of blockchain is supposed to it's supposed to be unlegislatable. It's
Right.
Like not needing that regulation,
well,
because obviously it's not happening.
Even if it needs it, it can't be. It can't have it. It's not possible.
Right.
It sort of defeats the purpose of it.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's not even possible to do it. Like with Ether, it's not possible to legislate that. You can't lock it down to where somebody has some control over it.
And so where the difference comes in is Web3 games gambling is very careful design. You're not going to want to have it where, okay, on the match you've got a slider, right? Maybe you just have a set price to play where, okay, each match to load in costs 200 tokens. The player may not notice it because they have thousands to millions of tokens on a start, but there's some way that you can monetize or give out token advantages. And part of it too is it's not necessarily always gambling, because you may not be getting tokens back. Maybe everyone puts 200 tokens into the match, but then the winner of the match gets a skin, which might be worth, about as many tokens as was put in, but the value of that skin would fluctuate. So there's all of these different aspects to it, and the subject of gambling is really interesting because legislation-wise, it is getting more free, which is interesting paradigm. Working at Google Play myself, it was really interesting to see the shift in gambling apps on the Google Play Store as policies globally change around gambling and what is technically gambling and what technically isn't. But Web3, I mean, if we're talking about casino games, Web3 is going to change it up quite a lot. And there's a lot of value that's offered there. But most Web3 games are not going to be casino-style games. And you can imagine that a developer could argue if they're doing like a tournament buy-in like that, it's not gambling per se. It's an ability for them to make a good amount of money with a low cost to each user. Because if you take the total prize pool and you take off 20%, the developer keeps that 20%.
It's like a pop bonus at like a fighting game tournament.
Exactly. So one big thing we've hit on is, of course, Web3 and all of these powers and values and Web3 games. One thing we haven't talked about is interoperability. And so one big concept in a game called Ready Player One, or a movie book called Ready Player One, is the fact that you have this massive universe and it's filled with all sorts of different content from many different IPs. How long do you all think it would take for something like that to happen where, all IPs exist in like one giant system that we're playing in?
Well, so I actually was hearing this because I have something that I've told you that I've got a couple of games I'd like other companies to join that game thing. So my idea is similar to what he was talking about earlier, where if you're playing one game, there's an area where because all the games I'm looking at are VR. So when you launch in, you're in kind of like I guess you could say a center, right? And you can choose which game. You can find groups that want to go play these games. And there's also a trade area where you can trade currency from one game to another game. And the rate might be different. It would be like a real world rate. So, if you have a shooter game, the currency's not going to be, it's going to be worth more per like in-game token there than maybe an MMO where you can make millions a lot easier. So you have an exchange. I think in that center, a really cool idea would be if you own these games and you have like a really cool character or something, you can bring any one of these characters into the center because they can't really interact with each other with a way. I don't see the Ready Player One aspect going as well because as cool of a story as it made, you do see very, 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 very quickly in that story. You have guys that have Godzilla, and you have guys that have the Iron Giant, and you have guys that have this, and you have some poor person that's got Scooby-Doo just hoping they don't get crushed. So, and we've seen games that actually do this. Disney's kind of done this with everything they've bought, where they make games that take completely different universes and cross them. They've taken Marvel, they've taken Star Wars, they've taken all their original characters, and you can go play with them together. But they've taken away a lot of the abilities from those characters and stuff, so they're not overpowered. Because the truth is, if you had Mickey Mouse versus even the lamest Padawan, the Padawan is going to cut him into little tiny pieces, and it's not going to even be fair. So I think realistically what you're going to see is something closer to something like the Center or something, where you can show off what you have and you can choose what you want to show from that game. But the actual interactions of the game will be what you see in like Sword Art Online or something, where you're able to go into these different universes, and within that universe, you're limited to the characters from that universe.
So I think interoperability needs to be defined then.
Yeah.
Because that's not how I would define interoperability.
I think that is hitting on something else Jeremy is right here.
Like the open source community has been talking about convergence for like 15 years now, where you have your Linux laptop, Linux phone, and Linux desktop, and it's all basically one device. That's sort of what I would think interoperability in that sense would be. But it's been 15 years and it's still not there. So how long will it take? Never.
Yeah. Pretty much. How much of a nightmare do you think it would be if Overwatch announced that they were going to partner with Valorant, and now you could play Overwatch characters in Valorant and Valorant characters in Overwatch.
Right.
It would be insane. A, for developers, also B, for users. I mean, they have entirely different principles for how their characters are shaped, how their shooting mechanics work, how their abilities work within the economy of the game. So if Overwatch and Valorant tried to provide interoperability between their skins, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. And so potentially never are we going to see a level of interoperability where I can take my gun from CSGO and put it into Overwatch. Fortunately, it's not going to happen. Now, what can happen is, let's imagine we have a Gucci bag, right? I buy this Gucci backpack, right? And it comes with an NFT. And what this NFT does is it has support across 10 different games, so that when I go play that game, I can register my NFT with the game and then get an in-game virtual backpack. And now this content could be made by the game developer, it could be made by Gucci. Regardless, there's the ability to take this physical item and represent it among your virtual identities. That's where interoperability comes into play, is the interoperability of NFTs, representing a virtual item or a item that belongs to an IP, like Gucci. And being able to use that across multiple games would have to be something that is supported by those parties, not necessarily third party. But there's also the option where maybe your game has the ability to ingest any NFT and make a in-game skin based off of it. Maybe it just, you have your like little Funko Pop or I forget what they call it, the Cyber Gorilla NFT face thing, and you've got your specific color scheme that you like, and then you're gonna go play CS:GO. You integrate your NFT skin of your monkey guy, and it creates a character model that's based off of those colors and stuff like that. And so there's some interoperability that can come into play in that regard, where you have systems that are able to ingest something that it doesn't really know, but find a way to convert it to be used in the game.
And that's just what I need, though, my MMO to have, brand marketing merchandise.
Yeah.
You wouldn't download
Have
a
commercials
Gucci
and
backpack.
all that.
Yeah. I'm gonna be drinking a Coke with the logo. For
Right.
it.
Yeah.
The logo has to be out. It has to be out.
Yeah.
You wouldn't download a code.
I didn't think about that. You're right. That is an interesting idea, but I don't know. Man,
I like the limited scope of it. I don't want Lara Croft to be wearing a Gucci bag. It would really take me out of the survival aspect. But my wife and I talk about this with Fortnite, because I got her into Fortnite, the first video game she ever played, and it was because we were learning about the concept of the metaverse. We watched that Ryan Reynolds movie, Fall Guy, or not Fall Guy, Free Guy.
Free Guy.
Yeah, and I was like, she was like, this is a cool concept. And I'm like, this kind of exists in some ways. We got into Fortnite, learned about why somebody would spend money on something that doesn't exist in the physical world, and now she gets it. And we talk about interoperability and how she's like, I have all this stuff that I like. I would like it, and I like the silliness and the scattered aesthetic. If there was another game like that, then I would like to be able to take all my skins. It would just have to match the theme, though, because as much as I like the flexibility of a system and like what you were talking about with a game per se and a system where created content can be used and all that, I don't know. Sometimes I like a game per se. Sometimes I like a very specific aesthetic and tone and all of that. So I think the limited scope of interoperability is never going to go away, and maybe shouldn't.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, and you hit on something that's a very fascinating part about this stuff. It's Web3. It's not going to replace single-player games.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to change
I have a concern with that though.
Yeah.
Because in the same way that these Web 2 based systems started, like Destiny went from a video game to Destiny 2, which is just Destiny, but it's now a system, you know?
Right.
And I saw a lot of games moving that direction in the same way that when they saw, that when the industry saw how much money WoW was making, everything had to be an MMO all of a sudden. And I'm worried that something similar will happen where once AAA titles start to adopt this, we will get more. I could just imagine the executives at Activision just salivating over this concept.
I can tell you right now. So I think your concern. I can see where your concern is coming from.
Yeah.
But we've already shown that it won't go that way. And the biggest AAA titles.
Diablo Immortal.
But let me give you an example right now. Take Bethesda.
Yeah.
Bethesda. Some of their biggest marketing right now is still for their single player games. This hasn't stopped them from doing 2 massive MMOs, and I'd say ESO is one of the best out there. There's people that argue it's actually beating WoW, and that the only reason WoW's out there. But has that stopped them from what they're announcing for like even Starfield this year or upcoming Elder Scrolls 6? Hell no.
Yeah.
And do they have just as much hype on both of those? Oh yeah. And have they talked even about co-op? No. So there's a company. You have the same thing with Activision. As much as everything went into Warzone, I'd say that their campaigns are still the thing that I like coming out of Call of Duty. I enjoy the campaign.
Okay.
They haven't put.
Is that what makes them the most money though?
But that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that even if it's not necessarily the highest link, take Lucasfilms. They've done multiple MMOs, and all of them have succeeded very well. Yeah. And we still have mass amounts of single player games coming out. In fact, instead of a new MMO, the new one coming out is based off more of the old KOTOR series, where it's an RPG. And so it's an open world RPG. It's going to work a lot more like Skyrim. So no, it doesn't make the most money, but at the same time, they also know that there is a massive player base out there, like yourself, that enjoys these games. I enjoy these games.
Yeah.
That aren't going to play a multiplayer game or don't want that multiplayer asset. The only way that I think you're ever going to see that completely go away is if they find a way, which they're getting close to, because ESO's done this very well, that they can instance them in a way that they can have one game that caters to both types of players. Right now, that's really, really hard. But you'd have to have a game that you could play an instance that's completely single player, and it doesn't take away anything from the game.
Right.
And at the same time, playing it multiplayer doesn't take away anything from the game, which is very, 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 very difficult to comprehend. So I think realistically, you don't need to worry about that, because if that was the case, we wouldn't have gotten even Skyrim. It would have gone straight to ESO. We wouldn't see Elder Scrolls 6 in the work, and we wouldn't see Starfield be a single player game.
Those are good examples, but I mean, like, you already see a lot of gamer fatigue with Diablo. It went from a game to a money-making system. And I think that savvy executives who are focused on their balance sheet and their fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders are going to prioritize what makes the most money. And once this starts making the most money, I'm worried the AAA titles, with exceptions, will lean in that direction and increase that fatigue that gamers are feeling of like, I feel like monetization is taking over the game, which, like you said, the game first has to be what it is.
And I had something to add into that. You mentioned earlier that increasingly people are asking, do we need to make curated content at all if we can just have our player base make all the content itself? Doesn't that directly go against the fact that it needs to be a good game? And I get that you want to have a good system like Mario and have set mechanics, and they're just
they laid a whole
using
lot of
those differently. They laid a lot of groundwork for it. But if you start making a majority of your games be only user-curated or user-made content, then that's my worry too, is that we'll lose that single-player or even co-op stories and things that are professionally made, and it'll the majority be.
And just to clarify, not lose entirely, right? Like those curated games will still exist. It'll just be kind of dwarfed by the AAA model.
Well, a couple things on that though. So, what makes a Web3 game a Web3 first? Is it the fact that just facets of it exist on chain, or does it need to be the entire game? Does it need to have the compete layer on the chain as well? And to your point, just to add on what you said, I guess. No, I agree with everything you said. I agree with everything that he said. But yeah, what makes it a Web3 game? That's what I want to. I may need to take a step back and find out where, like, what begets Web3. So is the definition here anything that exists on the chain that a game, like I have a physical console and that console talks to the to ETH and just it pulls data back?
Yeah, what I try to fall on for defining a Web3 game is blockchain and digital economy that the blockchain functions within.
So the still my computer or my console is doing the major work and it's just pulling, that skin that I have, or it's talking to the chain to get the amount of gold that's in my bank.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think with single player games, something that you'll see more likely is similar to what they did with later versions of Skyrim, and then what you see with Ubisoft, where, because let's take Assassin's Creed, that's not going anywhere, and I don't see that turning into a multiplayer game really ever. They tried it and it actually didn't work really well. Yeah. So what I think you're going to see more is, like, right now, I really like the Tom Clancy series. I mean, I really like a lot of them. I like that they've tried to go back to a more tactical aspect, and that you can play a more tactical aspect if you don't want all the gun skins and stuff. But at the same time, if I go play Assassin's Creed Valhalla and I've beaten a really high level boss on Tom Clancy, I can get, like he was saying, a cool skin for my axe or something.
Yeah.
But I don't have to do that at all. So the same thing they did with Skyrim. Some of the user generated content you can buy out of Skyrim's marketplace. At the end of the day, a lot of this, I don't think the reason why you're going to see it affect the single player games as much is because, I mean, EA and stuff has taken a lot of fire. In fact, they've had to change some of their games dramatically in updates in order to get the user base to actually even be happy with the game. And even then, they lost out on quite a bit. So loot box and stuff are going bye-bye.
Yeah.
But I think we'll see more and more of, you're a single player game, but if you're playing in our economy, either one, playing other games can get you a skin or something, or you can have a multiplayer asset. In Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you can send your main guy out so other people can use him in his little raiding party.
Okay.
But you don't have to, and it doesn't take away from the story if you don't. So I think you'll see more of those things connected to single player games.
Yeah.
But that if you don't want to deal with it at all, it won't actually take away from the gameplay.
And that's hitting on a very important point. The user experience is going to change very little. You might have something like an Ubisoft token that you can use across Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and I don't know if
everything.
Ubisoft has any multiplayer games, but you can use it around these different systems. One thing that is really powerful that a digital game allows us to do is to track what assets are being used. If you have a single player game, you can mod it, right? There are games like City Skylines and Skyrim, single player games that you can incorporate community made content into. So how will these games shift as Web3 becomes more popular? It won't be a tokenized game, but it may have tokenized assets. And this is really powerful. This gets into user-generated content being interoperable across everything. Unity right now has a Unity asset store where you can go in and you can download 3D models. You can download game templates, new scripts. You can download editor utilities. And all of these are made by people. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. What you could potentially have is a Web3 enabled marketplace for this user-generated content for games. There's already pretty cool blockchain out there called Render Token. And what Render Token does is it accounts for how much a particular object or 3D model is being rendered, and like how much time, how much total visibility, stuff like that. And what Render Token really offers is having an asset marketplace that does not charge based off of a flat fee. It won't cost $20 to go and license this asset. Instead, it's completely free to download the asset, experiment with it, and publish with it. The way that you pay that original content creator is through the tokenized system, that platform. Render Token can count how often this thing is being rendered, and then if your game's a subscription model, or if it's purchased, or if it's tokenized itself, you could figure out what is the proper amount of distribution to give back to that content creator.
Like royalties for NFT music.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, your user-generated content marketplace could be like subscription-based, where everyone's paying in $60 a month, and then everyone gets their piece of the pie according to how the render tokens are being split up. There's cool thing about blockchain is you can make it any way that you see fit. So if you think the economy for it should work this way, you can develop it to function that way. But it enables not just digital ownership for things like mods, or if I like a certain content creator's gun skins, being able to buy their guns for different games. Not just digital ownership, but reputation too. We can accurately account for how much a modder's mod is being used, and be able to attribute that value back into them using a decentralized autonomous system.
My concern is that for things like Skyrim, 99.999% of your mods are totally free. Won't this make it to where I have to spend money to get these mods?
I don't.
Like, isn't that forcing an economy
Yes
onto the player?
and no. Because, like I said, you can design the system any way you want. You could design it so there are very high premium costs for mods. You could also make it flexible. So you could have it say, the first adopters of this mod get it at a cheaper price. And the more sales there are, the more the price goes up. You could also factor it where it is free. And, the way you're monetizing it is instead that sort of subscription model where users are subscribing, content is free, and then developers split up the piece of the pie.
It's still not free. I still have to buy the subscription.
Well,
Right.
Then they're going to adopt Facebook's model by using a DAO. They're going to introduce something called an oracle that takes the information that what he was saying that the render token gives the information back to the chain or back to whatever to calculate. They're just going to start mining your data then, because you already have that thing in place.
Now you be the product.
Now you're the product. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And well, so
Whereas with modding
the
community
biggest
right now, there is none of that. If I want a mod, I just download it.
Right, especially
Right.
the modding community 10 years ago.
and well, think like how high quality are these mods that you're downloading,
Many of them are extremely high quality. Many of
and
them are
how do they get there?
Well,
Crap ton of man hours, and why? Because they see a value that they demand within their game and their system. So usually the benefit for a modder is now they've realized this thing and it's out there in the world and they're getting feedback for it. There are free to earn, free to play models that could work for putting money back in the modders' pockets. There's also something to be said for being able to directly reward modders for when their content is used. And this hits on something like, how expensive can you sell something? Apple can sell their phones for a higher price than Android because they're Apple and they're branding. People will pay the price for something that they see. And so if a modder uploads some content but that it's not getting bought, that encourages them to fix their market or fix their economy, but you could also handle that autonomously, where your assets, again, kind of like I said earlier, have prices that change depending upon how much they're used. And maybe it works sort of inversely, where it's actually expensive to buy a mod when it first gets released, but then you're actually investing in that mod because you get a little NFT or some measure of ownership of that mod, and then for every purchase in the future, you get some tokens back.
But then you're making mods with a fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. I've been thinking about that for music, and I won't do it. Because I don't want to make music based on ROI.
So I'm
That
actually.
is my
But
concern.
the thing is, if I'm an NFT artist, I make little art figures, I go and put them out there, they have an initial value. That value is subject to fluctuate over time. If I become a super popular artist 10 years down the line, my NFTs from year one are going to be super valuable because there will be people holding on to them who aren't making them a part of the economy.
Oh, for sure. It's better for making money. I just don't think it's better for making art.
Yeah, well, so
Not necessarily though, because you can define the system how you want. You can spread the equity where it needs to go.
Yeah.
And if you determine that, yeah, like you get some royalties for buying an asset, it can be just 5%. That way the artist maintains a 95% control over their revenues and their profits, but 5% of their stuff goes back to their early
I see what you're saying.
investors.
So make it so that it's not enough of like a ROI focused investment. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you can experiment with a model to figure out an economical approach that'll work for
Right.
both the user and the creator.
Yeah.
So I kind of agree with him, but I think there is a where of area tokens would work for modding. So like with all the modder communities, not sure if you guys know, that's what got me into coding is modding.
Okay.
So I'm like connected to a ton of Discord ones with the Valheim, Skyrim, everything like that.
Yeah.
One of the things about a lot of modding communities, period, no matter what their other views are, as far as modding goes, they're very libertarian about it.
Yeah.
It's for the community, by the community, and it's free if you want to be free, and if there is paid or something donation, there's a reason for it. Now, there is an area where I think tokens could work for modding. So have you guys ever heard of bounties?
No.
Okay, so bounties is an area, so like Skyrim right now, they have the Skyrim Together mod. It allows you to play Skyrim multiplayer.
Yeah.
A massive team got together, finally got it working after it got taken away from the modder that wasn't doing a good job with it. It works now. Now there's some of us in VR who'd really like to be able to play that together. The problem is there's not enough of the community that most modders say it's worth their time. Right now there's a bounty online that anyone can put money into, and you could make this token, and it's up to about $200 right now.
Okay.
Anyone or any team that's able to get it working is able to claim that bounty.
Yeah.
So imagine I'm a whale. I am playing Clash of Clans, or a Web3 version of Clash of Clans that has a bunch of user-generated content. I may put a bounty out there because I'm a whale and I'm rich and I care about the game a lot.
But you can't make it.
Yeah, and I can't make it because I'm not a technical person. Maybe I put a bounty out there. Hey, here's 5 million tokens for someone who makes me a pink, army with sparkles.
Yeah.
And then, the first person to go and do that gets a bounty.
Right.
And they could release the mod after for free because they've already made 5 million tokens off of it. They don't care. They just want the reputation from it. And this hits on another way that you can monetize the game as a developer. Reputation. One of the biggest things in free-to-play games is not actually stuff you buy that makes you better at the game, but stuff that you buy that benefits the community around you. So there is this, I forget the specific name of the game, but they had this thing that you could buy that when you bought it, it shoots out a bunch of treasure chests for other players next to you that they can go up and grab. And when it grabs, it shows a little message. So what that does is it sends out a huge message on the server flexing that, hey, this person just did a drop. And then when people go and pick up that drop, they read whatever message you left for them.
And Division does that.
Yeah, and so this is creating and monetizing reputation. You can do the same thing for modders. And instead of, developer just entirely relying on user-generated content, maybe they put bounties out there as the developer and continually, reward or provide, bounties to contributors who have very high reputation tokens or something.
Well, and they kind of do this now, actually. You talk about that. So some of the things I've got paid for in game tests that are open, there's bounties on if you can find a certain bug or something. Like, let's say they know this bug's out there, but they can't really get it to they can't replicate it. If you can replicate it, there's sometimes bounties out there. I've done multiple alpha tests and stuff where they're like, we're dealing with this and we don't know why. But it's been reported 6-7 times and we can't replicate it.
Yeah.
If you can tell us why, I mean, I've got a free copy of a game before because me and two guys, we were like, yeah, we'll go try this. And we ran to every corner of the map and then all of a sudden realized, oh, and it was something stupid. If you stand on a certain coordinates and jump, and there was like 6 of them in the game, but the game just couldn't register it, so it flung you. And it flung you so fast that it made you look like you were teleporting. And one of our guys realized, because he actually had lag, so he saw our guy going, that you weren't teleporting, you were getting flung.
Yeah.
And once they knew what they were looking for, they were able to find it like that, and we all got a free copy.
And you can have your bounties be enabled by smart contracts.
Right.
And say, hey, I'm the developer, I'm putting out a bounty, maybe it's a special skin as the reward, maybe it's tokens, but the implication of it, part of the smart contract says that once you fulfill this bounty, we own that content, or you have to distribute that content on our mod marketplace for free. And so you can have smart contracts that bind the creation of a thing, but not just the creation of it, the actual deployment and long-term support for it as well.
I think my biggest concern is kind of like a sort of negative view of the world, in that all these things are great if people do them.
Right.
But they could just as easily choose profit over these things, and they
As
can
people
easily
tend
say,
to do.
I don't
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
I mean, that
it
is sort of.
brings in like the large company aspect of it, to where, okay, instead of focusing on just creating content that we enjoy and that we love, I'm gonna now try to create content that makes a lot of money.
But the nature of blockchain, though, is explicitly against that.
Okay.
I mean, when you start introducing like a DAO, you have a consensus of how everything's supposed to work. There's
transparent.
not one person,
Yeah.
and everything, any code that's implemented comes to a vote. With the board of the DAO, and so I don't like where it's implemented that the chain now communicates with your system specifically to do the thing. That could lead into what you're saying though. But you have that oracle, and it's giving the information back. So now the game or the chain or whatever the main manufacturer has your information. We're back to Facebook analogy. It's still pulling your data. That's
Right. And so one other kind of similar thing that I have when we're talking about these virtual economies is, and this may not, I mean, it's kind of related to games, but kind of like with these NFTs, will the original manufacturer of the game start making a forced economy? And my example is, one of my friends is really into this type of stuff, and he talks about how, wouldn't it be really cool if you only released 5,000 copies of your game, you only gave 5,000 codes, and then when you were done playing it, it might be cheap at first, but when you're done playing with it, you have to resell it, and as people buy up those 5,000s, they get more and more expensive, and then you have an economy created on people wanting to play this game or having
Artificial
to
scarcity.
buy it.
Mhm.
Exactly. And this is exactly.
Yeah.
It becomes an artificial scarcity. So how do you prevent companies from taking advantage
Doing
of
that.
Yeah.
So as far as like a game thing, I can tell you one reason why I don't think that would be. I would actually go back because of the money thing. So the artificial scarcity could work for like a unique art-based game or something, right? Something that's more of like an art design. And there's only like 100 copies out there. There's a few games out there that are like that because they got released, they were on CD, so people had them, and then they got banned or something, and there's only a few copies
Right.
out there, and those do have a scarcity. But now we're also finding ways to copy those. So one, people will find a way to copy the game and something like that, and you'll get bootleg copies all over the place. The other reason is because the truth is, as human beings and as most of the populace, I mean, I've done tons of market research and stuff. There is nothing that really keeps our attention for long, especially in games and stuff. That community will move on and drop you like that. Honestly, I mean, we've seen launches that just because their servers were too overloaded, it takes the game almost 2 years to recover. I'm big into New World, and it's only now recovering because of how bad it was, because of how many people wanted to play at launch.
But the thing with the scarcity value though is that it multiplies itself.
Well, it does multiply, so but I guess what I'm saying is that if you take, so like let's say you put out a really cool game, and then this is just a miraculous game, you will make way more money by selling to 3 million people than 5,000 people and hope that that game life lasts for however many. Eventually it will be something cool to own, but it's going to be cool to own to a certain market of people. So over a long period of time, you might make more money.
Maybe I just want to sit back and watch the chaos.
I have a feeling, and over a long period of time, I think it could make more money because you're right. Eventually, there might be one copy left, right, and it's worth like $1 billion.
Wu-Tang and the Martin Shkreli thing.
Yeah, it could become worth a ton. But as far as just like yearly, you're going to make a lot more off having millions of players buy it, buy whatever you put out for the game, and then turn that around and turn that into more content or a new game.
Yeah, that's my because I've been thinking about artificial scarcity in like in other use cases for NFTs, but yeah, I agree that in gaming I don't think it'd be an issue because widespread adoption is.
There is one way it will be an
the
issue,
best
though,
for marketing.
and I intend to use it. So for skins, you
For
know how
skins.
there's limited skins for like Halloween and stuff. So those are already limited scarcity.
Yeah,
I want to make the skins in my game more like an NFT.
yeah.
And the idea is that instead of just being locked to an account or something, you can sell them. But they can also get deleted. If someone just leaves or something, they just gone. And you can see how many are left. So if you're one of the guys who was like one of the first Halloween or something and still has that hat or whatever, that'll be scarcity. And to an extent, I will have an artificial scarcity because those events only last for a week, a couple days, something like that. And I'm all about like, cool, you managed to be part of that event, but I want you to be able to resell it.
Yeah.
But as far as like game itself, no, it's just not worth it unless it was like an art piece or something to prove a point.
And there's this. I don't think this will be a problem because if you have a Web3 game that is play to own or play and earn, you have the ability to cash out from the game. If you no longer agree with the game or something better comes out that has a more equitable model that isn't, abusing the player really, you have the ability to cash out. The value that you put into the game, you can get back out. You could sell all of your CSGO skins and go start playing Valorant. You can't sell all of your Valorant skins, unfortunately. You could sell your account. That's technically not allowed by the developer. But the idea is that you kind of using the blockchain and the decentralized aspects of it and having it be an economy that needs to be monetized rather than the game system itself, it creates an incentive for game companies to make the player want to stay and to reward them, give them value back for staying. Because if they don't, they'll cash out that value and go somewhere else. And so that problem of artificial scarcity can be developed around in how you make your blockchain, but also with how liquefiable your in-game assets are.
I do think you said kind of like gaming economies, like the devs kind of, I see a possibility of devs like changing rules or with updates, making certain things more valuable, or kind of, developing to drive an economy, and that might take away from developing to make a good game. But like that already happens with like Games Workshop and Warhammer 40K minis. Every time they come out with a new rule, it's to sell a model and they'll like rebalance. So like that's just gonna happen with games anyways.
Yeah, and it could be a part of your DAO or your blockchain that should an item be changed significantly,
You could based on the DAO.
yeah, you could give users back a reward for the value they may have lost.
But that's not going to happen.
Well, they already, they kind of already are. So two of the ones that I'm playing now that are newer. One is New World. Another one is it's called Xeno, but it's like one of the first MMOs for VR. I think that they could have done a lot better, but it's still got some interesting concepts. So right now, what a lot of these ones are doing, and Destiny did this a bit, is Destiny just overdid it. But like, so for New World, massive updates. They changed a lot. There were certain mechanics. I'm more of a hardcore punishing player. I like that. But I do think some of the things they took away from that aspect were better for the game. I think it plays better. But I had things from the original game that now just, it's not useful. And so I've got two options. I can either trade it in for a decent amount of gold or resources or something, which I think is fair. That can benefit me now. Or me, just because I'm sentimental like that, I'm holding on to it because now it just says they were funny. They're like, now I've got a little note on it that says part of a bygone age.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, guys. But I can hold on to it. And eventually I might be able to trade it to somebody because it's like, wow, you had one of the first. It's a tooth from a tiger that you just don't need into the game anymore.
Yeah.
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 But I do like it that if you do change something like that, the players that did work hard for it, because there's also Zenith messed us up the first time. They didn't have their legendary armor right. And so a few of us were just grinding for it, and before we could get the last couple pieces, they changed it. And all those resources became useless. And they lost almost half their player base on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why Ethereum came about.
Yeah.
Because the Warlock in World of Warcraft was nerfed.
Exactly.
And,
What?
yeah, that's why the dude was like, Blizzard has too much control over this. I want to make a...
Decentralized.
The Ether first came about because he wanted it to be a decentralized computational machine.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the computation sucks. It's like 7 transactions per second.
Nice.
Play a video game at 7 clock cycles per second. But that's where it came about.
And it's interesting. So I have a interesting question to pose. It seems like now we're all pretty familiar with Web3 games, them being dependent upon multiplayer and economies and just many different kinds of assets and user-generated content. What platform or genre of game do you think is most likely to massively succeed using Web3 first?
Strategic puzzle.
I think mobile. Well, yeah, but I'd say mobile.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of thinking like Fortnite, things like that.
Or
Everyone's
Roblox.
always talking about their newest skin that they got, their gun skin. You're a noob if you use the default skins. I was like, well, I don't want to spend money on this, so.
Yeah.
I think it's likely to happen in games that already have really strong economies, collectible assets, and an easy ability to scale a player base. So when I think about games like that, yeah, it's either got to be open world, like crazy big adventure, that has many different ways to participate in the economy, whether you're like grinding, killing monsters, working markets, building guilds, training new players, making art. There's all these different specializations you could do within that sort of economy. Where I think, and this is my personal thought, that we're likely to see a Web3 game succeed first is with collectible card games. The economies for these are pretty
Hearthstone.
simple. Yeah, like Hearthstone, there's not really an economy because it's a collectible. It's not a trading card game. So I guess not CCG, not collectible card games, but trading card games. Stuff like Magic the Gathering.
I play Magic on chain.
Have you heard of Gods Unchained by Immutable X? It's exactly what you're talking about, and
Right.
it's Web3.
And you know, it's very easy gas cost wise because you're having, instead of a real time game, it's turn based. That creates a lot of flexibility for how often you're needing to run your gas toll. It's already a medium which people like buying and trading things, and they have a sense of ownership over your cards. There should be a sense that I can trade them with other people, or that some cards will be more valuable over time as they get more of them in the economy from packs or whatever. And it's really, in my perspective, simple to get. You know, like an economy for a trading card game, we've seen it work.
Yeah.
Magic the Gathering's super easy to work with. Is it going to happen for shooter games? Is it going to happen for Fortnites and Skyrims and all these other cool games? Yes. Where is it going to happen first? On the simplest game to execute. Like was said at the beginning, a Web3 game isn't fun because it's on Web3. No. It's got to be a fun game first. And so and when we're talking about what is going to come about first, if you have a longer development cycle for your game, it's going to take longer. So short cycle, small scope games.
Just to argue with that point,
Yeah.
like it's not fun unless, or if it's because it's Web3, it's fun. Axios did sort of prove that wrong. They
Right.
it was a crappy game. Like the graphics not any better than Zelda behind you, and they got a $60 million evaluation.
Well, and the thing was that was so valuable there.
No, it was valuable because of the buzzword that was used, because of Web3.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just good to be first.
Well, and that's the thing is, if you've been playing Valorant or Overwatch for years, and then a new shooter comes out that's a Web3 shooter, and you play it with all of your friends, and now you're used to being able to trade skins and sell your skins and play in tournaments with actual prize pools instantly, are you going to want to go back to Overwatch? No, because it's not as cool. It's not as fun. You're not getting to use your friends' skins. You're not getting value back from the game. You're not having these more high-stakes tournaments and increased levels of play because of that stake in the game. It's not going to be the same. And so this is kind of where I said the user experience won't really change at first. It'll be just like you're playing a game. And there should be no actual change to that user experience. What changes is your time outside of the game, how you buy skins, how you interact on that level. And once that user experience changes, it'll be really hard to go back, just because you're used to now getting value back from the game and being able to have so much more ownership and rights for your digital content than traditional games like Valorant and Overwatch give you. So what do we kind of touched on this already in terms of the barrier for entry, having to set up a wallet, all that stuff. Assume we do have a really good single sign-on system for this, and that part of it has been solved for Web3. What do you think the biggest challenges for Web3 games would be to get mass adoption?
People need to believe it's safe, and right now that's something that just Web3 in general is taking adaptation.
Okay.
That doesn't
Yes.
stop people in Web 2 though, right?
No, you're right. But let's be honest. There is a false sense of security for people in Web 2.
I don't see why that would be an issue
I'll say
moving
it's
forward with Web 3 though.
false
right?
sense of security. It's just there's ignorance. I don't know. For me, I think that it's not even Web 3 until you pull everything into Web 3. You can't have some layers Web 2, some layers Web 3, and then all overseen by this overlord of one single person or group of investors. I think it needs to be decentralized from the top down in order to be a Web 3 game. And that's my opinion. So you start with the DAO and then move the compute layer to the chain, and you can have different chains do different things. The database be on a different chain, but it all needs to be on chain for it to be Web 3, in my opinion.
Yeah. So to summarize that as a challenge, the challenge is the technical scope of building for a whole new framework, right? And adapting your current practice for making games and whatever engine you use for a new Web 3 delivery platform.
Theoretically, it should be possible.
Yeah, but you would say the biggest challenge is just
Yeah.
the upfront development cost.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges would be the fact that crypto and that type of thing, digital currencies, people are just averse to change. They don't want to use them. They don't want to create a digital wallet because then that's splitting up my money in real life. How much do I put in my digital wallet versus how much do I keep in my actual bank account,
Right.
whatever. And because of that, I think that's a big barrier to entry.
Yeah, so there's a liquidity problem. Not everyone understands the benefit of investing in stocks because it's oh well, I'm splitting up my cash value, like the cash that I can immediately get on hand. And for some people, there is not value in investing in securities, but there is a liquidity problem. If I'm putting some of my money on a digital wallet, then I don't really get to use it.
Right. It's just there.
Right, but if
You really get it back.
Trader Joe's, Sprouts, Pizza Hut, all these massive retails suddenly pick up Ethereum,
Right.
then, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot less oh, I'm investing in a security and more okay, I'm just opening up another spending account.
Right. It kind of feels like the trend between switching from a cash-based economy to a credit card or a digital bank account type economy. It's people were really averse, they didn't want to because now I have to have some amount of cash for some things and I have to have some amount in my account for some things. And I think we're going to see the exact same thing, and I think we are seeing the exact same thing. I have cash, I have my debit card, I have my credit card. Do I really want to add another way to split my money? Because I already don't have enough in those other ones, so yeah, I really do think that's a big barrier to entry.
And yeah,
And once they solve
that barrier is going to be carried by whales. It's the same thing for free-to-play. When free-to-play models started coming out, people were very sus. The mobile games were not trustworthy. It's well, what are they doing to make money then? Are they taking advantage of me? Are they abusing my data? Are they doing all this stuff? And turns out the answer is not really any of that. The answer for free-to-play games was 1% of our user base will generate 90% of our revenue.
Right. Yeah.
Right, and the key to solving that problem for a Web3 game is being able to capture the whale, being able to ensnare him in your game, and then having that whale contribute.
To his point though, there's a bigger problem that I feel though too. Cryptocurrency specifically is sort of when people hear blockchain or Web3, it's synonymous with cryptocurrency. And cryptocurrency is I'm not a fan of cryptocurrency. I don't think most people know that. Even though I'm the blockchain group program here, I'm not a cryptocurrency guy. I am a fan of the underlining technology. I've read the 1974 white paper about the original blockchain ledger, but now it's become synonymous with this coin that fluctuates in value, more than the weather here in Oklahoma does. And right now it's taken another plunge, and so it's ruined that technology. It's overshadowed by this failing currency. So I think that needs to be overcome too. Like the terms need to be split up. Like cryptocurrency is on the chain, but the chain is not cryptocurrency. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't go both ways.
Well, and to what Jeremy was saying, that's kind of what I mean by security, is because it's become so synonymous with those terms, is that if all of a sudden you say, oh, my game has crypto, it's a lot of people aren't going to feel secure with it.
Well, and that's one thing is, remember how I said the user experience wasn't going to change much?
Yeah.
The user might not even know that the game's on a chain. They don't need to necessarily know. What if instead of exchanging your tokens out in Ethereum, you did it in stable USD, so the USD token? Then that's a little bit different, right? Because it's still on a chain, still a digitized asset, and your value will remain very consistent for that USD token. That means, conversely, your token's value will remain pretty much the same.
Well, stable implies the same, not pretty much the same though.
Yeah, right.
But
So-
it's not stable. Like Tether, Filecoin, not Filecoin, the other one. I can't remember the name, but they're not stable. It's
Right, and a lot of these are economic problems. How do you set up the economy, the blockchain, the interactions of it? What are the rules that you set up? But like I said, user doesn't even necessarily need to know that the game's on the blockchain to reap the benefits of it. That's something where you can have a very fine control as a developer for how your tokens exit the economy. Maybe you don't have a Ethereum exchange. Maybe you have an exchange for real world products, and when you play the game, you can spend 500 of your tokens to get shipped a plushie or some merch or stickers. There's all of these different ways that you can monetize it, and then that's really good from a developer perspective, because you're not being like, okay, well, we have to cash out Ethereum. You're just like, we have to cash out merch, and then how much that merch costs us is really like the transaction rate.
Well, I think to solve this problem initially, because like when I'm looking at a lot of this, especially early on, so right now people spend an ungodly amount. I mean, I'd say I'm a lower spender, and I still spend quite a bit in some of these games, real world currency into, their top tier currency or whatever it is for skins or whatever. My thing is that if you can get anything back from that, even if it's not a real world value, it's a plus. So even if you can take that currency to another game, you can mine in-game currency to get that premium currency and take it to another game. Even if the only thing that the Web3 really adopts, at least at the beginning, is a currency that's only really worth inside the games that are connected, it's still better than what they have now. I mean, and it's substantially better.
I understand that.
Yeah, if I told anyone who bought skins, you can make something.
I spent like 14 years playing WoW.
Yeah, so you spent way more than.
I understand that.
We're all there.
That's a good point. It doesn't fix anything, but
No, but yeah,
it's a good point.
People will spend the money, and if you tell them they can get anything out of it, they'll spend more.
Yeah, at the end, WoW turned into a second job for me.
Oh, I know.
I'd get off my real job and go play World of Warcraft for 8 hours raiding.
Well, that's the thing, because right now, because New World has so many survival aspects, I know exactly what it is. I have to get up at 2 a.m. to go do an hour of mining,
Yeah,
because it's the only time that my server, everyone else isn't doing it.
If I was able to get just 2% of that money back, then yeah, maybe I would still be playing.
See, yeah, that's the.
Yeah. One final question, round of discussion before I'd like to do our closing activity. Should, I don't know if should is really the best way, but we'll go with it. Should game economies be treated as part of the real world economy that the other markets are involved in, or should they be considered separate from our real world physical economies?
I say separate.
Well, how tied though? How tied are you talking about? Like, can the game market affect the real market?
Well, the thing is, should we as developers allow that to happen?
No, not at all.
Yeah, so we're on the same page there. I like the way it is now. I wouldn't be opposed to necessarily an interchange. Like if it got to a point, these in-game markets got really good. Honestly, they got on Eve's level, because Eve allows this to an extent. You're able to buy your monthly subscription with in-game currency if you mine enough of it, which some guys do. I was with guys for a while. All they do is mining, and they pay for multiple accounts.
So you're talking about the same thing as if I was to go to Europe, I'd go to that exchange and exchange my USD.
And so I'd be open to something like that, but that would be the closest I'd be open to. Is otherwise, I have a lot of reasons they should remain separate. One, I don't want to deal with the real world governments and stuff when I'm building a game as a developer. I just don't. It's not worth it. It's not worth them being involved. And I'm so much about decentralization and libertarianism and stuff. I don't even want to give them that. I don't want to give them an inch. As soon as it's touching their market, they have a reason to mess with me.
You would rather have a value exchange than
at most.
Going the other way, I wouldn't want to bug in a game to crumble the dollar.
Exactly.
You know?
It's.
Though, if I may,
Yes.
as long as it's seen as, oh, it's just a game. It's just a game. It leaves developers to do exactly that. Create something that can be used to exploit young people, and then it's just a game. Like there's no legislation, there's no regulation, and then you lead to stuff like what's happening with Roblox and stuff like that, where young people are being taken advantage of, and like their brains are being hijacked and that kind of stuff.
What's happening with Roblox?
So there's a video. I'll send it to you. I don't want to get into it. I mean, I would love to get into it, but I don't think Zach would love to get into it. As long as they're not seen as real economies, they won't be taken seriously, and the things that are happening will continue to happen and maybe even be perpetuated. So there has to be something. There has to be something in place where they're seen as real economies with real dangerous things that can happen.
And that's the thing is, it has been proven that just based off of the value of time, people will value these economies. EVE Online, tens of thousands of dollars was lost. You can't actually separate these economies. They exist in the real world, just in the virtual part of our real world. So there's everyone's heard of virtual reality and augmented reality, and XR being extended realities. Well, what's above extended realities? Just plain reality. So it's all encompassing. You can't actually escape separating an economy in a game from the real world economy, because there will always be someone trading that asset against something else. We can't separate the British pound from the American dollar. We can't differentiate these economies. People will always be trading GDP. They'll always be trading these currencies against each other and on Forex. So it is impossible to separate it, especially if we look at games like Pokemon Go. It's inherently tied into the real world. If you have an economy inside a game like Pokemon Go that's geolocated, you're actually influencing the real world economy a lot. You're telling people where to go, what places in the city to stop. Is this cafe a Pokestop or is it not? That's going to generate revenue for that real world physical place, because people who are Pokemon Go players will be more likely to visit it if it is a Pokestop.
I know SeaWorld did this. So when it first came out in Cali, I was there, and I mean, it was massive. Like certain beach locations and stuff were flooded. Well, SeaWorld got a deal with them and had multiple Pokestops in there, and even had like one day a week because there were so many. At first, they didn't know why so many people were showing up. There was all these players, and so then they had a sign that like you can't play Pokemon Go here except certain days. And then they ended up making a deal where they even had events inside SeaWorld that if enough players showed up, you could get a special Pokemon or a special skin for a Pokemon and stuff like that.
I just like that story started out with them having a Pokemon Go problem.
Oh, it
and
was.
that's
They had
hilarious.
no idea. And at first they were like, what the heck? But they had so many people at the gates. Like they went from, oh, it's SeaWorld, right? A few families to like, all of a sudden the next week, like it was like 20,000 people just showed up. Yeah, it was ridiculous. Like the lines standing out front, and people were like walking along the edge of the fence that couldn't get in, trying to get just close enough. It was bad.
Sorry to bust your bubble, but these things need to be tied together. We're going to see, and you can have a game that exists completely virtually that is a lot more separate and gamey feeling than something like Pokemon Go. But for the simple virtue of if you create a virtual economy that's layered on top of the real world, you're going to have real world impacts. If Pokemon Go has specific Pokemon for each region, there will be people who travel to go to those regions, and that will have many
As long
impacts.
as it stays, the system stays like the ish rolls downhill. If it makes it back up to the dollar, then that's a problem. But yeah, everything's going to be based on something. Everything's already based on the U.S. dollar.
Right.
So as long as it stays that way, and then my Pokemon issue doesn't travel back upstream, then it's
And that's
whatever.
But the thing is, it will. If I have a special Pokemon Go event happening in Anchorage, Alaska, well then flights are going to be all booked up, raising the cost of flights and gas and hotels. It's going to influence the dollar. That's the thing is you can't, if it works one way on the stream, you can't stop it from working the other.
Well, I mean, that would be so minuscule though that, like, yeah, it's going to annoy some subsection, but it's not going to completely tank the U.S. economy.
Unless it was like a dystopian Ready Player One situation.
Right. Well, yeah, and there could possibly, I mean, the potential exists, right? The potential exists for a virtual economy to screw over this one. If we think about inflation, inflation can happen to game tokens. It can happen to games. That's why their economies need to be very carefully made. Because you can go in it and you can mess it up.
Well, I've shorted stocks in games just to get something to work for a war.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I do it in New World all the time. I know two clans are about to go for each other, and I'll go short stone.
Yeah.
I'll buy it all up to people in mine, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh no!"
But rolling back uphill, do you have an example of that?
I'm trying to. I believe there's been one in like World of Warcraft in China and like gold farmers.
Well, China and I know what you're talking about. It was in Taiwan.
Yeah.
And that doesn't affect me.
No.
So
over
okay,
here.
but even Taiwan, their currency still rolls downhill from the dollar. So as long as it doesn't make it up to the peak, I think it's going to be fun. Well, me as a single-minded American, I don't care about anything else going on in the world type of person. Whatever, that doesn't affect me.
Right. So the thing is, the dollar has a lot of trust. People generally trust that the dollar won't inflate beyond other currencies, and that it's a really good base marker. And so that's where it's like, hey, a game economy, the simple fact that Coca-Cola has an NFT in Fortnite shouldn't make Coca-Cola go from $1 to $3. That would be nuts. The real world, I guess, example of something like that happening would be if trust is lost in these other currencies, and it's more trustworthy to use the currency of a game or a virtual currency.
And I guess, and I mean, I understand that they're all connected. Like even games right now, for the last 10 years, have had an influence on the dollar in some way or form. But I guess my thing on keeping them separate is, so you take Pokemon Go, you're right, it has a very real world effect because people will go places. But the Pokemon tokens you can get for getting skins or bonus items or whatever, I can't go into Starbucks and say, hey, I've got 3 million Pokemon tokens, I'm buy. And my thing is, I don't let that change because it allows an opening. So I'm okay. I am okay with something where you can exchange them somewhere, but I want it to be similar to the euro, to the American dollar, to where the American government or the European government can't say, hey, now that you directly can be used, we have a say in your economy. I do not want any kind of federal legislation coming in and talking about, oh, well, you have to sell this for this price and this for this price, and I'm going to regulate your sell of stone in the game because it has a direct impact.
So there's already pizza shops that sell pizza for Bitcoins.
Yes.
How is the government regulating that, do you think?
So, I mean, that one, like you said, it's decentralized, but you also have just a currency system, not a game system. So what I'm saying is with the game system is with the decentralized currency of like Bitcoin, it's a decentralized currency and it's a system based on currency. I'm more concerned about them actually trying to make legislation on the game itself. So for example, gameplay, so coming in, let's say, so for me, like I'm one of my games, I harvest leather. So let's say, and I sell the leather, I think for 50 cents for base leather. Okay. But if I'm able to take that direct in-game money and influence the government, then they're able to come in and very easily say, okay, well, your economy is, I mean, they've put wars on countries for less, and say, hey, you have to sell leather for this price or something, because otherwise it's considered an import in an indirect way, or something like that. They'll come up with something that says, hey, this directly influences our economy and you're affecting it. So I'm okay with an exchange.
That's the reason Axios was valued at 60 million or 60 billion or whatever it was for a crappy game, because smaller countries were using it as their entrance into a banking system.
And that's what I was saying. And I don't want, my games are connected to that. I don't want countries saying, hey, I'm involved with you now. I like that separate. Even if there's an exchange somewhere.
I think the big challenge there is them asking if you want to distribute to those markets, because you're always going to be dependent. You gotta file your taxes somewhere. Mm-hmm. You gotta incorporate somewhere. You could potentially do it completely decentralized and off the grid, and then who's to say like they want to make a change? You got to vote on it in our DAO. But with what you're getting at, I think the big thing is recognizing where your partnerships would be. If Fortnite goes and partners with Starbucks and you can use Fortnite money to buy your Starbucks now, maybe the U.S. government would get upset and they would try to figure out how can we get involved on this. They are likely to be taxing your revenue anyway.
Idiocracy.
So the thing is does Ubisoft pay taxes on their games as a service? Yes. Have they battled the government for this? Yes. This is what Epic Games was upset with Apple and Google about. It's basically, Apple and Google are the government, and they have a 30% rule, and they're not going to change it. So the only way that it will change is with legislative or action through law, having a court decide. And so Epic Games tried to sue Apple because they didn't feel their monetization scheme was fair. Now, what you're talking about is the opposite of that, where it's the government saying, hey, your thing's unfair.
Yeah.
We need to go and do something about it. Your only real option at that point is either comply, because they are the owners of that market. Indonesia owns the Indonesian market. You either say, I'm going to play with you or I'm not. I'm going to distribute to this market or I'm not. Because you can't avoid that. Now, you can make your game totally decentralized, not connected to any governments at all. And then, if it's not about like, do I want to distribute to those markets? Is that market going to be accessible, or are the government going to put up firewalls to try and block you from that? That is more likely the situation where you have a decentralized autonomous thing, and then the government comes up to you and tells you, hey, for our country, you're going to need to make these changes or we're going to firewall your game. That's really the option. And so, as a developer, you can't pony up the government because if you are distributing to their market, you will affect their market.
Right, but I'm saying that the in-game economy, I can have a wall that doesn't allow them to have direct access to it.
Yeah.
Like I said, that's what I'm saying, that most I'm open to. So like right now, if you go to an exchange and you have a bunch of euros, you can turn them into American dollars for whatever they're worth that day.
But
I'm open to that.
What about when Starbucks says they want to use your tokens for buying coffee?
Well, then Starbucks could make a Starbucks token, and if they want to exchange them on that area, that's fine.
So
This
they're
is-
saying that to interface with the real economy, the token has to be exchanged.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Encapsulating the economy is
And that's
seems
the
like
thing.
a good move.
Well, it
Yeah.
does have to be exchanged, but it can be exchanged in something like something like Coinbase, where it's still regulated. It's still that Coinbase is regulated by the government, or you can go outside to a decentralized exchange and then you pay a stupid amount of taxes on or a conversion fee. You don't pay taxes because it's decentralized, but
Right.
there's a large convergence fee or conversion fee to turn it into some kind of form of government money.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's lose-lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do think, trying to keep it encapsulated is a good idea. Having it be exchangeable for other tokens is interesting.
That would be my thing, because the other problem is as soon as it's not encapsulated, I also lose a ton of my player base, because if you're not 18, technically they can tax every single transaction in game.
Right.
But now every company out there that exists, every brand is going to have their own token. Like that's going to become a bigger problem.
Well,
Not necessarily,
I was
though,
going to say.
because what you could do is have a standardization for an exchange. Maybe like a global exchange that everyone registers their token on. Maybe it's not actually an exchange. Maybe it's its own index or ledger or something. But at that point, it is actually a good thing. Yes, it's a lot of computation power, but it gives you the ability to measure the actual, like, if we look at the economy as a global whole, if every entity and organization has its own token, it represents how much of the total market share of global value it has.
So I like that idea because I'm a globalist too.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's perfect for me. But come on, this is
Feasibly,
America.
it's a little bit like, are we there yet?
This is America. It's not going to fly.
I mean, we're technically already close to it a lot. If you look at Ubisoft, they have their currency for using on all Ubisoft market. Blizzard has the same thing. Steam has the same thing.
Yeah, but these are all like you're talking about things that involve us liberal nerdy types. Like straight up, not to bring politics into it, but you start talking about now my go down to a Texan and say that now your money is going to be based on this money or this digital value that the whole world has now. Now everybody is switching to this. So what happens over there is going to affect here. Explain that.
The way that I would explain it is it's already what happens. It's just happening at a more transparent, accountable, and effective manner. Right now, global currencies affect each other. If there's a natural disaster, if there's a war in another country, it's going to affect every other country. I mean, we've seen this with gas prices. Gas prices went up a little bit because of the start of the war, but then as soon as Russia was embargoed or whatever, gas prices went up universally. It affected people who have no idea the war is even happening. And so the global markets are all tied together, and that's how you would explain it, is there's already, what's happening over in China is affecting here, not quite as transparently. We can't measure those impacts quite as well, but if everything was digitalized and on a blockchain, you might have more transparency and the ability to say, okay, this happened in China, this is going to be the effect on our economy. And with the increased amount of information that would give, it would allow you to reduce the negative impacts of something going on in another place before they arrive in your local economy. Because you have that information, you have history and data that you can use to try and measure what the impact of future things will be.
I'm for it. I just think it's going to be a hard sell.
Yes, and it's going to be a very lengthy sell as well. Awesome. Thank all of you for participating so much in this discussion. I want to end this off by doing the thing we did at the start, where we're all talking about our experiences with virtual economies. Now I want to talk about what is something you have gleaned, learned, or started thinking about that you weren't thinking about before the seminar now. We'll start the opposite way. So, Isaac, anything you've gleaned, learned from this seminar, or that your brain is now active about?
Sure. Yeah, hearing all the different perspectives about different sides of this argument has been really good. Or not argument, different sides of this discussion has been really good. But I think what's sticking with me definitely as like a machine learning and data guy is the whole on-the-chain idea is really, really, really interesting. To have currency and interactions and anything that happens inside of a game be documented and to be able to do things with that is really exciting and interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait for machine learning models to really come in with this massive amount of data that the web's going to have, because previously data was so unverifiable and mutatable, but now with blockchain it's like data's a lot more reliable, and that means better data, better results, better models. It's gonna be super cool.
Kind of similar to him, one thing I think I really learned and enjoyed from this is being able to have it back and forth, because most of the times like these, like I said, are either through a Discord or a chat or something where I might not get a reply for a couple days or something. And even like what exactly, and kind of what you guys were bringing up with even the single player games, because that's really my world on this, is the gaming side, and or even some of the things Jeremy brought up that he's like, hey, this could be kind of a hard sell, or how are you going to get someone to accept this idea? I think those are things, I mean, that we can do. Some of this I'm very supportive of, but there are a few points you brought up that even though I've got some ideas on why it wouldn't be a problem, I'd like to look into a little bit more on hard evidence that would support my reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where, yeah, I can go with that.
What I thought was really interesting was the idea of using the blockchain to facilitate the user-generated content and allow like people who create like mods and stuff for games to actually get paid for their stuff, because a lot of these people do it for free or for very small amounts by donations. So that allows, rather than just like one or two or three people just creating, like even like the best mods out there are created by very small teams
And
to
the big-
actually be expand their scale that much more.
And the big thing is value too. You know, it might not come out as currency. It could come out as in-game items, right? You're getting skins or stuff. It could also just be reputation within the game. You know, you've got glowing characters around your name or something. Like, there's a lot that goes into how can we give back value to the people who are creating it within the system. It's really cool.
Title and MMO.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize, I don't think your average person realizes how many ways that developers make money and monetize the game through gaming. So for me, my mind instantly went back, like back in the day. It's like, how you made money through your company, but there wasn't as many avenues for you yourself to make money. So I was just stuck in that little area. When did that completely change? Just when the internet came, when the blockchain came? When did game developers, start having all these other little avenues to make money, monetize?
Oh, it's really interesting. I love this that you brought up. The first video game. Well, let's go back to the first game, chess. Chess wasn't the first game, but we'll use it as an ancient game. Why was it valuable? How did it generate value for the person who generated chess? Well, they're now just having fun where they never had fun like that before. So, like, video game, why was Pong made? Because some professor really had an idea, and how did he start making money off of it? Pong didn't make him money. Yes, it made him some money being able to go to universities and set it up and have people pay $1.50 to play. So yeah, it made some money. The real money maker there, though, was scaling that technology. So how do game developers make money? You got to take you got to take away all of this stuff and say, what are you actually doing? Real-time 3D simulation. That's what's happening. And so that's what a developer is doing. How you make money off of that is assets. Do you have 3D things that you can package and release as a part of a game or to sell to other developers? The actual systems themselves, so not just art assets but gameplay assets as well, and like different AI models, stuff like that. And you also have very clever marketing. You have doing your games as a service, doing them as a subscription, having models for like a Patreon. There's all of these different avenues for game developers to start making money. And where did it come from? It started from creative application of real-time simulation. The guy who made Pong, he wasn't working on video games or games before. He was working on naval simulations and computer software for the Navy. And Pong came out of the software that he had already built for a sonar scanner. And it was just taking that same display and saying, how can I do something different with it? And so where game developers specifically make money is out of creative outlets for this simulation technology. Something really interesting Isaac told me about was this simulation built in Unity for training Amazon robots. So instead of having real Amazon robots moving around a factory and figuring out how to lift heavy things and put them on shelves, you do it virtually, and that saves you a crap ton of costs and generates you money because now it's virtually free to train AI models within this simulation.
And you can do it in tandem, right? So you can run 100 of those at a time instead of just one.
And you can run them billions of times or billions of times per second.
And you're not risking real world product. So how do game developers make money? Creative applications, specifically when it comes to like economies and things, it's endless. You can monetize through swag, reputation, community support, premium features, additional content boost to your game, being able to even just like talk with the developer. Endless avenues for monetization. It's really limited by your creativity and different solutions that you can find that generate value. A little bit of a long-winded response.
It's open thought.
Yeah. Matthew, what have you gleaned from today?
I think for me, just realizing some of the possibilities with this technology. I would have never really thought about transferring items between games, interoperability, skins and things, and just some of the possibilities for it are really interesting.
And when you go to talk about those possibilities don't necessarily stem from Web3 as a brand.
Right.
It stems from digital ownership. That's what Web3 really represents. Right. That's the next generation of the internet. And there's so much that is interesting and possible if you can fully digitally own something and have a bunch of rights around what ownership of that means.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm pretty excited about the technology, but like all technology, concerned with what people will do with it. And of course, I'm not like it's not like weaponize it or anything, but yeah, what happens once this moves from the table of the devs to the table of the board execs, and what are they going to then do with this technology that allows them to change the way they monetize the product?
Yeah, and the Web3 is kind of like a new world, right? And what happened with the colonization of the new world? There was a lot of struggle, a lot of strife, a lot of mess ups, a whole lot of failure. But eventually people started getting things right, and they figured out okay, well, this is my land now because the King of England has definitely reinforced it or whatever, and I've got all of my towns established. And Web3 is a very similar thing.
Without the genocide.
Without the genocide.
Great.
Which is great, yeah. And without, like, you know, taking people's land, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's literally a new world. No one owns it yet.
Yeah.
What's cool about that is it's totally unexplored, so it's going to have a lot of failure.
Yeah.
It's going to have a lot of people approach the problem and mess it up, hurt people even.
Yeah, and
which sucks.
it doesn't result from failure. It results from success. People are achieving what they want to achieve, and what they want to achieve is swindling people.
Right, and
It's failing upward. That's
and that's the thing is it's like the new land. A bunch of explorers are going to come through. Some are going to die. Some are going to walk away with riches. But eventually, as people stake their claim, things will become more clear and established for a protocol of how a Web3 company works or what you do in Web3. So, you know, already it's like the new world is just being mapped out to see what is there, and people are starting to stake claims.
Good metaphor.
Yeah, the claims aren't necessarily going to be solid, and we're going to see a lot of evolutions of this tech.
For sure.
Jeremy?
I mean, my opinion really hasn't changed at all. Yeah, I still like the tech. I just don't like the application or what I guess crypto's done to it. I enjoyed this though. I'm used to having these conversations with the feelers, not the people that actually know things. But, it's hard to get a good point through to somebody. Now I feel like if you start a sentence out like that, we already have a problem. We're gonna be talking.
Have you gotten any new insights about blockchain or Web3 or anything in this world?
Not anything new. It's still early. I know it's in its infancy. And I also believe it's inevitable. It just needs to grow up some more.
Totally.
It took Web 1 and 2.0 25 years, and we're 8 years into this so far, and it's grown fast, and with the like Binance and stuff, we're up to millions, or is it hundreds of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of transactions per second on the chain now.
Oh yeah, it's
that was from 7 when ETH was first. And that's been like 5-6 years. So at this pace, we're on track to do something interesting, but we'll see.
Awesome. Nikki?
I'm kind of where Isaac's at. Like, I'm skeptical of a lot of it, but excited about, and kind of where Jeremy's at too, like the tech, I guess, like, like the data collection aspect of Web3, like I think can really like have like a lot of cool potential for not even just machine learning models, but that's where my mind goes. But I still am also like kind of playing on what you said. Like I don't exactly trust like the intentions of a lot of it.
Skepticism is healthy. Yeah. I think that with a new world, there's going to be a lot of failure. It's inevitable that it will be charted, claimed, and operated on. Does that mean it's going to happen easy? No. There's going to be a lot of people who fail it, who think they're doing a good thing when really they're doing a bad thing.
Yeah.
And that skepticism is healthy. So much of this space right now is riddled by misconceptions, disagreements on terminology, just the flashiness of it and not the actual tech. And so that's going to lead to scams and upsets and failures, which is natural. So keep that skepticism with you, but no, it is inevitable.
like us as techs though, we've done a really crappy job at explaining this to the layman though. You know,
No,
to
that's not the
them.
purpose of this. Oh no, but you mean in
But
general as a whole?
yeah,
Exactly.
Yes,
Like, we-
it's terrible.
yeah.
Indeed.
We need a new marketing campaign.
The podcast I posted yesterday, it's a 15-minute video, how to explain Web3 to your mom. It's perfect. He says in the beginning, if you bring up blockchain, decentralization, autonomous, or any of that stuff, you're gonna lose whoever you're talking to, because general consumers, their user experience of the internet is not going to dramatically change, and they're not going to care about the blockchain or decentralization or anything like that.
Like,
They're just
Facebook
gonna
is the internet
change.
to my mom.
Right. They're going to change. What's going to change for them is the value of what they can do and their new ownership rights that they've never had before.
Yeah.
That's what's changing. And so you've got to talk about what the specific person likes, what's interesting to them. So if I'm going and I'm talking to a chef at a restaurant, I'm going to explain Web3 to him, not talking about games or NFTs and art or music. I'm going to talk about how it relates to food and restaurant businesses and DoorDash and what, a blockchain or a Web3, because you don't want to use those terms. You've got to keep it as close to the user experience as possible. It's a bad example doing food because I haven't thought about that before. But
I can actually give you 3 examples of food. We have those new robots that you can put in a home that then use Gordon Ramsay and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And stuff. So that's, you can buy these. They're just arms that sit over your thing. With the new fridges and stuff, fridges can order things. So you talk about a restaurant immediately with Web3. You could have it where supply chain, your fridges and stuff in a restaurant are automatically tracking produce, making sure that they're fresh. Will automatically order once you get to a certain point. And, for certain restaurants, let's say you have one really good chef and you get 2 autonomous chefs. I can go,
Until those autonomous chefs,
I know.
They start creating more autonomous chefs. Then
all of a sudden, we get that ratatouille scene, right? The guy will open it and they'll just be everywhere.
What's the recipe for a good chef?
it's going to be Skynet.
Thank all of you. I really, no one mentioned from this conversation that they gleaned that they actually understand what Web3 is now.
No.
But okay, that's fine. What I hope all of you take away from this is a better understanding of how to talk with other technical people, with laymen, with anyone about what Web3 is, and what some of the possibilities it's bringing to the world are, and be able to talk about it intelligently and relate it to stuff that people will actually care about. So we all care about games here. We've all played games. They're all fun. And the only reason games were brought up as a topic for this seminar is because it's an easy medium to talk about Web3 in. And I do believe it will be the first established claim in Web3, but...
It was almost the reason I didn't come. Gaming. I don't want to talk about gaming.
Right. Well, and the thing is, we're talking really about Web3.
Right.
And so when you go and you talk with Web3 to, the everyday person, don't put it in the context of Web3.
Yeah.
Find out what they care about or what's special about them and relate it to that. Then you can talk really intelligently about Web3 and take away all of the semantics and flashiness of the terms that have been tossed around that people have formed negative associations with.
What stupid thing do you like?
There's an NFT for that.
There's a debt for that.
Yeah, for that.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much for coming to the second ever Holberton Technology Seminar. If y'all don't mind, I have a fancy little QR code here that shows the power of the blockchain and that it's breaking into our physical world as we know it through Bitcoin. Yeah. Scan the QR code, get yourself on that survey. Let me know what you felt went good about this. You were like, hey, Zach, those donuts were terrible. I can't believe you got vegan donuts. Why would you make such a decision?
Those were good.
I know, right? That's the question.
That's where you go.
Those were vegan?
Success.
Yup, they're really
Wait,
good.
those are vegan?
My
That's
keto
nice.
chili won last night.
Yeah, that was fire. That was really good. Yeah. What else was I gonna close off with? Yeah. Let me know just how the seminar was for you, what you would like to see different, and also if you have any idea for future seminar topics, pieces of technology that are interesting to you, let me know. We'll be doing these quarterly next year. So one every 4 months. Alumni and students are always welcome. So even if you graduate next year, you're free to come back for these seminars and participate in them. Eventually, hopefully, I hope to scale this up to be something like a podcast that Holberton releases, and then it benefits you because you can have LinkedIn posts saying, "Oh, hey, I was at the Holberton Technology Seminar." You can follow this video link to see me talk about Web3 technology and why it doesn't matter, or whatever. There's
Brutal.
lots of possibilities that can stem from this. One thing I wanted to glean from you all right now, Web3, very technical topic, right? It's got a lot of facets to it. There's not a Web3 course here at the school. There's not a Web3 offering. Really, all of our offerings are Web3. That's kind of how it works. Just the Web3 is so encompassing of everything that if you're a full stack developer, you're going to touch Web3 frameworks in the future. If you're a game developer, you got to worry about economies and how you talk to the chain. If you're in machine learning, you're going to get to use lots of cool data spawned from Web3, but also be able to account for not just like success metrics, but actually distribution of the value that the model is producing. It gets really complex. Like blockchain plus machine learning is its whole other thing that we could get into. But there's all of these different aspects to Web3. Would y'all be interested in something that's not necessarily a more formal technology seminar like this, and more of just like a monthly or weekly, I don't know what the cadence of it would be, a like Web3 workshop or like get together and talk?
Yeah,
I would be.
I'm down to it.
I would be interested in that.
Cool.
If it went beyond just talking, like maybe like demos and like
Yeah,
examples,
or
and that kind of stuff.
yeah, like maybe it'll switch up from session to session. Maybe we'll try different things. We'll look at, hey, let's look at this framework and take 3 hours to try and sprint out a really quick web app.
Holberton to buy us all ledgers.
Yeah. So awesome. I will then start working on what that looks like and probably have it planned to deploy next year, doing some sort of weekly or monthly Web3 thing.
Cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank all of you for participating. Feel free to go steal some donuts, enjoy your lunch hour and the rest of your day. Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the feedback. I love it. Good, bad, small, large, any feedback is very welcome.
Words.
And yeah, I'm with you. It's always good to talk to
It
someone that
was.
you can actually
It
talk
was.
to.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the things I like most
That's the
about
whole
in like
base of the
Is
blockchain
I'm
there.
used to it. I'm not saying
Is
this like
a
in
ledger
pursuit or anything. A lot of times
thing.
when
It was.
Yeah.
I'm like the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I'm not that smart.
Thank you
Either.
for
I'm like,
joining us virtually, Dave.
I'm always the smart person.
Hope you had a wonderful time at the
I am
seminar.
This was nice.
And so yeah, I love being in a room where I can actually say something and at least get
Some